Hey guys, this is going to be a response to Complete Rationality's video about free will versus determinism. He defends free will, and I happen to believe in determinism. He says that determinism applies only to the macroscopic scale, at least from what I understood. And he says that there are a few things that are outside the realm of determinism, such as the human mind and some other things maybe. He gives a few examples of like a person that puts his hand on a hot stove. Now his instincts would tell him to remove his hand from the stove, but he can still choose to keep his hand on the stove even though it goes against his instincts. And because of that, he believes that there's something more than determinism. Now, about the stove example, I would say that the choice he made to keep his hand on the stove still conforms to the laws of determinism. Even that decision, given the right data, could be predicted in advance. Basically, why would a person choose to keep his hand on the stove? Perhaps to test if he's able to do that. And why would he choose to keep it on the stove just to prove that he can? Well, that's probably because of other previous reasons that could be explained. And it all boils down to the initial conditions and the wiring of his brain. He also talks about something called spontaneous choice. I think it was that if you were given two different cups of different beverages that taste the exact same to you, and somebody asks you to quickly say which one is better, A or B, and you respond, for example, B, and even though they both tasted the same, you actually made a choice of free will in case of A or B, because you could have chosen either, but you chose B for no specific reason rather than you having free will. Now, again, I think that this is also a case that is influenced by determinism, because perhaps that person has a tendency to reply with B rather than A. So if he would be presented with a few beverages, he is more likely to say B than A. Maybe. It's not as if he's exhibiting true free will here, but just that the way that his neurons are wired cause him to say B instead of A in a situation which both of them are as likely to be selected. Now, this all boils down to the way that our brain is wired, and since it's too complex to explain how we make certain decisions over others, it doesn't necessarily mean that our brain is not as well, that our brain doesn't conform to determinism as well. He tries to say that not everything conforms to our biological and biochemical reactions and the way our brain is wired, but rather that there is some kind of consciousness, that our consciousness somehow exhibits true free will. So I would say that I disagree with him on that. I just think that the brain is just a very complex computer, basically. It's a very complex computing mechanism, and basically the fact that we can't explain exactly how our brain influences us to make certain decisions doesn't mean that it isn't deterministic. So let's just say that there are some kind of, I don't know, algorithms in a computer program that make it choose randomly. Well, is it really random the way the computer chooses? No, because there are certain factors that influence how this random decision is actually made. And the same exact thing applies to the brain, but just way, way, way more complex. So what I would have to ask Complete Rationality, because I didn't really understand, is that he somehow claims that consciousness is exempt from following the deterministic laws, and that somehow there is free will, then I would have to ask, what is the source of this free will? If the laws of physics and biology and the biochemical reactions in our body are not responsible for the choices that we consciously make, then what gives consciousness the ability to have free will? I think it kind of gets into the realm of the supernatural, because as long as there is, because complete rationality happens to be an atheist, so I don't really think he believes in the supernatural, but I don't think he realizes how much his claim borders with the supernatural. If there is a natural explanation as to why we make certain decisions, therefore it conforms to the laws of nature and physics. So it might be a very complex system, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it is not also deterministic. There's actually a good example that I thought of, like a double pendulum. For the most part, the double pendulum exhibits a very chaotic and unpredictable motion pattern. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't conform to the laws of motion in physics. It's just that the sensitivity of the double pendulum and the initial conditions and the way you moved it and the force you used to use it, every tiny factor changes the outcome in such a substantial way that it is utterly, at least to our current capabilities, impossible to calculate and impossible to predict. And that's not even going as far as the complexity of the brain. It's just two sticks connected to each other. That's all it is. And it still is so chaotic that nobody can predict it, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't follow the laws of physics and determinism. So that's as far as it goes for complete rationality's arguments for free will. I would have to say that this kind of thing troubled me a lot when I was deconverting. This is actually the thing that made me deconvert, because if there is no free will, then it doesn't make any sense that a personal God exists that expects you to do things. Because if there is no free will, then no matter what you do, nothing can be considered a sin. Because if God set all the initial conditions in place, then you're just behaving the way that your destiny ordained you to behave. And that's why if God actually punishes you for making certain decisions, that God would be an asshole. Now, the way I thought about it was, basically every decision you make in your life, I would argue, is influenced from a few things. The genes that you're born with, the way your parents raised you, the environment in which you grew, the period of time in which you grew, and the culture in which you grew, and so on. Basically, your brain records a lot of certain experiences and eventually shapes what future decisions you're going to make based on those factors. But those factors are still deterministic. You do not choose your genes, your parents, the environment you're born in, and stuff like that. You don't choose the influence you're going to get from your friends, because even if you do choose your friends, that choice was still based on previous factors influencing your decisions, and those factors had other things that caused them, and it all goes back to the point where you're born. And that's how I think it actually happens the entire life. The brain gets more and more complex, and your decision-making capabilities get less and less predictable the older you get. But that doesn't mean that the wiring of the brain is somehow exempt from determinism. I'm really interested in hearing what you guys think about this, because I think this is a fascinating topic. Have a nice day, guys.